Hello, lost person. In today's video, instead of talking about one title at length, I'm going to be talking about 5 different games that are either demos or short enough to fit in with these other little cut up bits of game that I'm adding together because they don't really fit in anywhere else. I'm calling these little compilations the Mixtapes. Enjoy. One-Eyed Liko is set in a small grayscale village in 19th century Russia. Our character that we're playing as is the village blacksmith, and so he goes by Smith. You begin by getting piss drunk in the local tavern and talking to your friend, the tailor, sharing a story about a strange dream that you've been having. In the middle of your stupor, you're visited by some unseen and unnamed thing that will send you on your ultimate mission. Searching for the Liko seems to be akin, at least from my selected dialogue options, to seeking some sort of truth, though when pressed later as to a reason why, I decided that my guy doesn't really even know why he's doing this, just following the visions, as one does. Like most good stories, this requires leaving the relative safety of his village and heading off into the dark woods, from where it's said none will return unchanged. Your companion at the beginning of your journey is the tailor, your buddy from earlier, who seems excited to join you in your research and accompanies you in the beginning, though it isn't long before he's decided this journey was a terrible idea. I'm glad we leave this voice of reason nonsense behind rather quickly. He doesn't even help us set fire to parts of the cabin to find the pieces of keys we need. Oh, yeah, I haven't talked about that yet. At least in this tutorial level, your main way of interacting with things other than examining them is to burn away brush or debris with matches, usually to free something that's stuck or open a path. These matches double as a sort of flashlight, and it looks amazing walking down dark passages, having to toss your old match and relight another. Unsurprisingly, after solving this first puzzle, Smith gets himself locked on the other side of the door, and descending under the cottage we find in the woods, he finds the world opens up to an ocean or a river that extends all the way to the horizon, with us standing alone on a beach, facing an island in the mist. Check it out, I get to say the horror game buzzword, liminal spaces! I just mentioned that whole call to adventure thing. Having to leave home and enter the dark woods is like classic story circle stuff. That's not where it stops, though. This small intro into the game is absolutely saturated in artistic and religious motifs. The island that you find yourself trying to get to is the very famous Isle of the Dead by Arnold Böcklin. Along the trail, Smith finds pages to put into something called the Great Book. The first 2 stories reference the Odyssey and the 1001 Nights. Encounters between the mythical protagonist, Odysseus or Sinbad, and a giant, often one-eyed, like Cyclops or whatever. This is, I believe, what literature nerds call foreshadowing. The main puzzle of the short demo takes place on the Isle, and involves finding warped renditions of several saints, like lion and bull-headed versions. Some are either missing or having extra eyes. All over the beach you left from, broken statues and one-eyed clerics holding up the sign of benediction stand watch over dozens of shipwrecked hulls and piles of bones. I think the blend of mythology and twisted Orthodox Christian imagery was a very neat touch, and I'm hoping that most of the story revolves around a folk religious horror element. I didn't find the intro to be actually scary or disturbing, but I think it does set itself up to be an interesting game that is probably very well written. The creators want you to know up front that this is a game about mythology and religion. If I had a complaint about the demo, it's that I'm not exactly sure of the range of things you're going to be doing in the full game. I'm unsure if there's a fail state or combat. Not that the game requires those things, but I hope that there's more than just matches and key puzzles. The amount of effort that's put into showing off the game's literary depth in the first 30 minutes is something remarkable. I'm just not sure exactly what that remark is, since it seemed to come at the cost of showing the player something that gets your adrenaline pumping. The demo is free, so I encourage you to play it and make your own opinion, then share it back with me. Speaking of not needing complex mechanics to make a horrifying game, Fears to Fathom Carson House is almost the archetype of this idea. Like me, you may have heard about these games from a channel, Zeark. A few of the games I'm talking about here are mentioned in his horror games that are actually scary series, which I recommend checking out really if you haven't seen them. This is the only entry of the video that isn't a free demo, but it feels right putting it here since the game is both very short and, in my opinion, terrifying. Seriously, this game had me panicking, so I got my money's worth. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that all of the Fears to Fathom games are based on true stories submitted to the creators by people out in the world, which adds a whole extra level of horror. So, anyway, in Carson House, you're playing as a teenage kid who has been hired to house sit for some rich guy. Things feel off before anything in the game even begins to go wrong, even though you're mostly just running errands and texting either your girlfriend or the guy who hired you. There's something weird about being alone in a house that isn't yours, something intrusive. This Carson guy, your employer, seems to think you're his damn butler, though, so maybe the feeling is on me. While fixing the guy's computer, which in my opinion is far outside of your contract, you notice he has a security camera system, and you can use it to look around the property from his desktop. After learning that the guy who you're house sitting for is wrapped up in some pretty heavy drama, tension begins escalating quickly with strangers knocking at the door and mysterious packages arriving. Trying to shrug it all off and get some homework done helps, before you start receiving some ominous texts from an unknown number. Checking the security cameras, you'll see it detecting movement around the property, and you can see dim shapes of someone moving around outside of the house. We think this is one of our friends pranking us after we ran into them earlier, but that hope gets dashed by another friend once they confirm they're together at one of their houses. Almost on cue, a noise downstairs shows us that the back door is open and someone has turned on the oven. Someone is in the house. Okay, as much as I want to tell you all about it, I'd really rather you play this one for yourself. Playing out a true story about a home invasion had me freaking the fuck out when I was trying to figure out what to do to stay alive. I'm positive the other Fears to Fathom entries will appear in future mixtapes. Alright, so several things that I have to go over about the demo before I even describe how it plays. Ludo describes itself as a game about an individual unable to leave his own home. Ludo is a word from Latin meaning mourning, feeling great sorrow or regret, especially over someone's passing. These things together make for a very creative setup, and it tells me a bunch about the game, right? Well, maybe. See, the other thing before you start is that the demo is called Ludo: The Choice. And it says that this is a standalone experience, but also a representation of what the game will be. So, I'm pretty sure that this is the game. Maybe I'm getting hung up on grammar here, and this is really just one of those developer notes warning you that some stuff in the game is going to be a little bit buggy, which it is, and I'll get to that. But I guess what I'm wondering is how standalone this is from the main title. I have to say, I hope it isn't too far from the actual game, because what's here in the demo is incredibly solid. Okay, so the game plays a lot like One-Eyed Lico did, sans matches. Only the environment you're trapped in here is much more claustrophobic and labyrinthine, and in some ways more surreal. You're not exactly sailing across the river Styx into a painting or anything, but if you're a fan of the contemporary haunted house vibe you see in a lot of horror games today, then you're really going to enjoy this. I think a lot of what you see in Ludo is familiar, covered furniture littered with household goods, but I think that familiarity is what works in a lot of these instances, sort of like a recurring nightmare played out in different ways. Your main goal here is to complete this set of pictures that are plastered along art-strewn walls. The bedroom these crayon murals are in seems to be for observation, since there's a one-way mirror looking in. All around the house, notes are scribbled along the walls, and rooms seem jammed together without any real logic added to them, and they're punctuated by rows of locked doors. Prison bars block any exits and seal off the rest of the house for now, which seems to go off in every direction endlessly, and chains dangle from the ceilings everywhere you go. Hey, you guys get to say it with me this time at home. Liminal spaces! Seriously, if you're a fellow fan of one of my all-time favorite horror games, Visage, then I think that you'll enjoy this demo. There is one issue that I wanted to talk about, which is the camera and mouse not really syncing. I'll try to show it here, but you might have seen it already. It is highly annoying when you're in these mazes to get lost just by looking around, and not in a way that the creator is intending. I am also quite sure that this would be fixed in the actual game and might even be updated in the demo before release, but I just wanted to note that you have to deal with a kind of janky mouse look. This game is just bizarre. I don't know how else to start talking about We Harvest Shadows. It's not really weird in like a bad way. It's just incredible to me that we have a horror farming game in the works that looks and feels like this one. It's both serene and terrifying and janky and really emotionally gripping, but I feel like I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. So, in this one, you're playing as a guy on his way back home when he makes a fateful decision. Instead of driving to go towards his normal path, he diverges and goes off to buy a farm. I'm not sure if this buying the farm is supposed to be a gigantic on-the-nose metaphor or not, but either way, he closes himself off from the rest of the world and begins a new life of resource building and exploring the countryside that he's now purchased. The game plays with a day-night cycle, with you wanting to perform your daily tasks and get to bed as early as possible every night. Because at nighttime, your sanity will begin to decrease, and things around the property begin to act in a very sinister way. A painting you have downstairs gives you a visual representation of your sanity, I think, which also depends on the cleanliness of your farmhouse and upkeep of your property. You can sell lumber or grow vegetables through the day to earn money to upgrade either yourself or your tools and build new stuff. And the demo has a surprising amount of options. You can spend some time grinding money to get all of these upgrades, but the to-do lists can be pretty strict, and you're unable to sleep without getting your daily chores done, in addition to whatever you're wanting to do to improve your farm. It creates a very delicate balance that you can stumble pretty hard with at some points. But on top of all of that, there's also the land around you to explore and unlock by reaching the tops of radio towers. It's like there's 4 different games going on at once in We Harvest Shadows. The demo gets you through the first week and introduces some threatening elements, and also gives a lot of hints that our character isn't altogether well himself and is running from quite a bit outside of this farm he's bought, while he waits on someone to come and join him. There's so much going on here that I think this demo begs you to replay it and try different things while you wait for the full release. And I'm very, very interested to see where this one goes. Alright, I didn't mean to imply that We Harvest Shadows was the weirdest demo in this first mixtape. That honor has to go to the Silk Bulb Test, the sequel game to solo developer Tim Oxton's Flathead. Another game featuring buttons, levers, and you being fixed to a chair, only this time instead of playing a menacing slot machine game like in Flathead, it would seem, as the name would suggest, that you're in some sort of test or conditioning. You're asked a series of repeating true-false questions and shown a lot of increasingly disturbing photos. Behind you are strange noises in the dark, but all you're able to make out is the glow of the projector and some vaguely human shapes in the back of the room, like hands propped on desks, kind of like watching. A large part of the testing seems to be centered around looking at photos of people and calibrating either yourself or their machine, if those are mutually exclusive. Once the first calibration is done, it begins saying things like, "This is a door," or "This is a car," at first, and shows you things that are mostly not those things. After a set of these questions, it'll show you some disturbing video before another round of questions. As the test progresses, a sort of timed element begins, with some monstrosity thing getting closer to you as you have to look down at the desk to perform the actions that the test wants you to do. Eventually, you're either told that you've passed or failed, and are sent back to begin again. Of all the games I've covered here, this one is the shortest, yet it's also, weirdly, the one I'm the most drawn to. I've played Silk Bulb Test over 5 times, trying to see the different paths that you can go down. And I'm really, really excited for this game to fully release so I can finally talk more about Flathead, but I would like to wait to talk about them together once Silk Bulb Test releases. God help us all when it does. Alright, so that's it for the first mixtape. I hope that you enjoyed this strange little compilation of games. If you have any demos or short horror games that I should check out to add into the next one, then you can comment them below, and I will see you next time, and thank you so much for watching.